Hi, everybody. I am so excited to welcome our guest, Alexia Brue, co-founder of Well and Good. If you at all follow the booming wellness scene, Well and Good is likely a household name for you. In my opinion, Alexia and her co-founder, Melise, really put wellness on the map for a national audience, quickly becoming the go-to destination for all things health, nutrition, clean beauty, trends, and more. And over a decade later, Well and Good is still the industry leader. So welcome, Alexia. We're so excited to have you today.
Thanks, Sarah. Thrilled to be here.
I don't think I ever told you the story, and this is true for everyone listening, but I think the year was like 2000. When did you start Well and Good, actually? What year did you guys start?
2009, that summer.
Okay. So I think it was 2010. I was doing PR in New York and I saw you at Dry Bar. And I knew who you were. You obviously had no idea who I was. And it was like a real like celebrity moment. And I didn't have enough nerve to come up to you and say hi. But I was a wellness aficionado. I was obsessed with what you were doing. And it's just so funny, over a decade later, we're sitting here talking and to think about how big the wellness industry is. It's insane. And I really think you guys were just such pioneers in making wellness, I think, accessible. I think there's obviously a lot of brands out there and media outlets out there, but I think Well and Good has just done a phenomenal job of making things that maybe feel a little aspirational accessible. So you guys have just done a phenomenal job at that. And I want to get into that a little bit more. But first, before we go into anything, how are you? We're 6, 8, who know how many months into the quarantine. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
I mean, I think the answer is not too bad. Which
Yeah,
is I reading an article that, it's like that's an easy answer to give when people ask you how you're doing in this day and age.
yeah,
No, I think, mental wellness is something that we think a lot about at Well and Good. And, there was a American Medical Association study that was just released in September that found that rates associated with depression are 3 times higher during COVID than they were before coronavirus entered our world. So, we just hosted a talk on mental wellness, and it's something that we just really think about. How do we give our communities the tools to, try to get through this? But no, I'm fine. My family is great. We've, been healthy and, just, it's a really hard time for our
yeah,
country and the world. And, certainly I don't think any of us have ever lived through anything like this. So
yeah.
I'm
You
recording
nailed
this
it with
a week before
you
the
nailed
election. That anxiety
yeah.
is.
Seriously, throw that in there. But yeah, I think you nailed it with mental health being something that I feel like maybe even a year ago was a little somewhat taboo to talk about. And now I look for the silver linings and everything. And I think the one great thing this pandemic has done has made mental health a topic that people are just really comfortable to talk about. And I think for people who've never even suffered from mental health issues, it's impossible to avoid it right now. And I think back to when the quarantine started and how novel the Zoom happy hours were and how, oh, it's so great. I can work from home and I don't have to put on, anything professional from the waist down. And then you kind of, peaked and then it dipped. And I think everyone's just trying to redefine this new normal. And I haven't spoken to anyone, especially moms, which I know you are, who hasn't had their days of just like pure insanity and like wanting to pull their hair out.
Yeah, yeah. And our kids are like, they're at actually good ages for this. And so it hasn't, I feel like we tried to look for the silver lining of like all this amazing extra time with them because they're sort of old
Yeah.
enough to be independent. But they're young enough, they're not yet teenagers. And so they still like hanging out with us and they don't feel like their independence was taken away. So we've just been trying to enjoy all the dinners together and all the extra time.
Yeah. I feel like as a mom, like I have moms with friends of all kids, and I don't know what the worst stage is, but I would have to, gather teenagers. I have 2 little ones, and it's actually strange. My little one is 8 months, and he hasn't ever seen a person without a mask. I mean, think about how strange that is. He goes out into the world, and everyone has a mask, and I'm like, what long-term effects is this going to have on him? But yeah, I think all in all, parents who are working I feel like are some of the true heroes during this because I think it's very hard to balance all of that. But let's rewind and let's go back to the early days of your career. Um, you really lived in the intersection of journalism and wellness for quite some time, even before starting Well and Good. So, when did you decide when you were starting your career out what you wanted to do, and then how did you get after it?
Yeah, I mean, I think like so many people, I sort of had a false start where I really wanted to move to New York, and I thought the way to do that was through a career in finance and investment banking. So that's how I originally came to New York, through one of those analyst programs where you know, they make it very easy to move to New York, and then I sort of got there and did the training and realized it wasn't for me, and so I got through that and then quickly made my way to publishing, and went into book publishing, and I was at Random House and really like loved the culture there. Still, some of my best friends are from that era of life. Um, and saw during that time so many really interesting books sell. And it was still this era in publishing where, you know, they would fund, just fun, exciting projects. Publishing has really changed. It's much harder for first time authors now. But anyway, through this experience at Random House, I decided to try to sell a book on public bathing, which is something that I had sort of fallen in love with living in New York City. So I found community at this place called the East 10th Street Baths, which actually my great grandfather Isidore had frequented when he lived on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And it was just a very like welcoming place. And I would go there all the time. So I love this idea of public bathing and all of these different cultures around the world having different traditions. And I ultimately wanted to open one in New York City. But I saw the pathway to doing that as writing a book first. And that would be my research. And from visiting these places, I would then have a much better idea of how to open this public bath. So I managed to sell that book, and, be able to leave my job and travel for a year. I think it'd be really hard to do that today in the current publishing
Yeah.
climate. It was possible in the late 90s. And that was sort of my entrance into wellness, although I didn't see it that way at the time. But then when that book came out, I started to get approached to do different things, from consulting on public bathing projects like the Standard Hotel down in Miami, to doing a lot of freelance writing about wellness and travel. And at that time, the wellness world was a little bit more focused on experiences that you'd have at a destination spa or in India or in Bali or whatever. And it was sort of, wellness was this little, luxury capsule in a faraway place and not yet part of our day-to-day lives. But yeah, that was sort of, so I went from book publishing to doing this sort of entrepreneurial book project, and then into magazines, and then ultimately digital. So I've been in a lot of sectors of publishing, just different. As the mediums have evolved, I've sort of tried to stay current.
Yeah, you mentioned at the beginning of answering that how much the publishing world has changed. And I think it was just yesterday that I read that the Strand bookstore, which was my favorite place in the world, is really struggling in New York, and I think to those just like iconic days back in New York in the early 2000s where everything was about Condé Nast and Hearst and everything it's just so different. It's crazy how different. So, for a site like Well and Good, I feel like, and maybe this is incorrect, but you've been a little insulated from a lot of the changes because I think you guys are just such early pioneers in being digital first and bringing, doing a lot of things that people could access no matter if they were in LA or New York. And so talk to me a little bit about, what was the impetus for starting Well and Good? And then what have been some major evolutional shifts you've had to take as the landscape has shifted so much over the last decade?
Yeah, so I think when Melise, who's my co-founder, when she and I started it in 2009, it was a moment not unlike this one, in that, there was a major global recession. It was the financial crisis, although that kind of seems like a blip compared to what we're going through now.
Yeah.
But it was this moment, I think, of risk taking and reinvention for a lot of people, because those careers that we had known before were really shifting. And that was certainly the case in magazines. I mean, Sarah, you'll remember like 2008, 2009, so many magazines either shuttered completely or they just shrunk to tiny sizes. And at that same time, the barriers to entry to start a website were really going down. So WordPress had really come of age, and suddenly you could create a sophisticated website for very little money. So it was an exciting time to enter digital journalism. And there weren't sort of rules or a playbook yet. And, Facebook was very new at the time. So it was really fun to be part of that world in the beginning. And then for wellness, like Melissa and I just saw so much white space there in that we'd both been reporting on this lifestyle for, a decade. And we could really see it starting to bubble up, in New York City and in LA and really like across the country as people were just starting to figure out, how to, include more fitness, better nutrition, all of that into their lives and whatever that looked like for them. And then also a whole new like crop of experts sort of coming of age. So, pre 2010, you sort of had like Deepak Chopra and Andrew Weil, and they were everywhere and they were on the advisory board of every magazine. And you didn't have so many voices in wellness. And so many new voices came on the scene at the end of the aughts. And I think it was really exciting for us to be part of amplifying that next generation of voices. And sort of helping, give them a platform to grow their businesses as well. And look, I think our timing was really good. I mean, everything you said at the beginning was so nice and flattering, but we also got incredibly lucky to care about, a beat or a lifestyle that the world started to care a lot more about. And if we played a small role in that, that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point for entrepreneurs. Every entrepreneur I've met, there has to be a little luck involved. I mean, there's market fit, there's expertise, but right time, right place, I feel is such a necessary ingredient in success. And similarly to when I started Covet, I was seeing the wellness scene starting to emerge, and I didn't see one agency that was go-to. So yes, I knew PR, yes, I knew people, but so much I think of our success was right time, right place. And I was smiling when you were talking a little bit earlier about the low barrier to entry for a website. And I remember PR in my early days in New York, and clients would say, I don't care about being online. At that time it was like, blogs and maybe, a few real websites. And I remember we would do our PR reporting, and I had some clients that would just like, don't even include anything digital. Digital doesn't matter. And now, as we were about to go into 2021, it almost has entirely shifted where print publications exist and they're beautiful, but they're almost like historical artifacts in the sense clients like to be in print because they think there's still that kind of, you can frame it and put it on a wall. But in terms of what actually moves products and has the opportunity to go viral, everything is digital. And it's just crazy. It hasn't been that long if you really look in like a snapshot in time where there's been that paradigm shift.
It's amazing. I mean, I remember even in 2012, people telling us that when they were featured in Well and Good, it resulted in way more traffic and way more conversion to business than Sunday or Thursday styles in the New York Times, and that was amazing. I mean, we were still super niche at that point and didn't have a huge audience, but we had a super engaged, audience who deeply cared about wellness. And so, yeah, I think to your point, when people really want to find, a consumer that's going to connect deeply with them, like digital, just act immediately.
Yeah.
And print is that sort of hood ornament. And I mean, people probably still care a little bit, but yeah, it's not gonna,
Yeah.
not gonna
Yeah,
sell
we
it.
actually even had clients that wouldn't let us host media events where there was website editors in the same room. They had to separate them. It had to be like real print journalists. I mean, it's crazy just being back in PR in the day. And now especially for brands that are 100% digitally native, I've had clients that have literally said, we don't care about print. We can't track it. People can't buy us directly. Like it's again, I'm sure they wouldn't be upset about getting a front page in New York Times, but it definitely has shifted. So when you started Well and Good, it's probably one of the best names of a company I've ever heard, because I find myself oftentimes just saying, yeah, that's Well and Good, and not in reference to you guys. But how did you come up with the name?
I mean, that was really Melissa's genius. I mean, we were sitting in a cafe and she came up with it, and it just felt right immediately, to both of us. And, we sort of never looked back. And then the plus sign also felt right, even though sort of ended
Mhm.
up being confusing in some ways, but it's just, all the ways that wellness is additive to your life, and all the different forms that wellness can take. So yeah, and it was the kind of name that I think was hard when we weren't known and stuff, because it's not a very sort of ownable name. But then as we got established, it worked out.
Yeah, I think naming when you think about starting a brand or a company, it's so important and it's so hard. I remember when I was starting Covet, my husband and I, who was my boyfriend at the time, we went to the marina and we looked at boat names and we're like, okay, we were like, could this work as a name? And then we went to a restaurant and we just started naming silverware. We're like, ooh, maybe it can be edgy. And ultimately, when you find that name, I feel like it just feels right. But back in the early days of starting a business, naming is one hurdle, but there's so many tough things in that first year. What would you say, and I know it's been a while, but what would you say in that first year of business was one of the most challenging things that you had to get through, and maybe even something where if you wish you knew then what you knew now, you would have done something differently?
I mean, I think one of the great things about having a co-founder is that you can like lean on each other during those difficult times. And when one person is feeling demoralized or down in the dumps, the other person is hopefully,
Yeah.
feeling more optimistic. So I think Melissa and I like sort of really helped each other in those early years. And that, look, we didn't know what we didn't know, and there weren't sort of rules around digital journalism the way there are now. I mean, there's more of a playbook on how you develop an audience and all of that. So, and I think we both really liked having low barriers to entry. So we were able to just pop up an MVP and start publishing. And, we had competitors sort of in the space at the time that were more had business backgrounds, and MBAs, and sort of brought that point of view to it. And it's interesting that, we didn't have that, but ultimately sort of we're the ones still standing because we just cared about the product and we just cared about putting out great, insightful, well-researched journalism every day, which we felt like that wasn't really happening in wellness. And, it grew from there. And then we sort of figured out the monetization later. Although I will say we were very focused on that from the get-go, but, we had advertisers literally from the moment we formally launched the site, but it was more around having the discipline of starting to sell versus that actually being, profitable or anything. So what I didn't want was to do what we saw other media companies doing at the time, which was to say, all right, we'll start monetizing when we get to this traffic number or this email subscriber number, because I think it's hard to sort of turn that on at different points because, you don't know what products work. You don't know what your audience responds to. And we sort of grew with our audience and started with, very small local advertisers and then grew into, much bigger national advertisers. So that was a really nice
Well,
way to do things for us, that's harder today.
yeah, and so when you mentioned Melise, who I love, what would you say? I mean, you two took on pretty different roles at the company. One was more focused on kind of like the publishing, the advertising side, and one was a little more editorial. Was that a very deliberate decision to really be like church and state? Because I look now at the media landscape and there really is no church and state in a weird way. I feel like it's now like affiliate and what's earned and what's paid and what's sponsored. And when I look back to the earlier days, there was such a clear line of delineation, and I think in a way that really helped to keep the integrity of journalism because it
Yeah.
was really earned, it wasn't bought. And now I think it's a lot harder to do that. There's websites today that won't cover program products unless there's an affiliate program, which means they get a kickback. And to me, I'm like, as an old school publicist and someone who studied journalism, I'm like, isn't that a little bit of a conflict of interest? But it's kind of the way the cookie crumbles. So I would just love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has changed so much. In our case, because we were so small and scrappy, we felt like, hey, we needed to divide and conquer so we could get as much done as possible. And even though we both came from editorial backgrounds, I had more business experience in my background. And, I was excited to do that. And Melise was excited to helm editorial. So we, we each sort of focused on different areas while still collaborating a ton. So like I wasn't involved in day-to-day editorial, but, we still would, talk a lot on strategy and how editorial was evolving as wellness evolved. So, that, and then I do think the church and state part is important as well. And that was always, we were always, I think, very conservative about that. And then to your point now with, really the business model in digital publishing being really broken because of Google and Facebook taking, 70 to 80 cents of every ad dollar and leaving so little for publishers left. So many publishers have had to shift to affiliate or commerce as a way to make up all of the lost revenue in advertising. So, and then I think subscriptions is also like a promising area that publishing is moving into. But I think with so much sort of commerce related content, things start to blur a lot. And I will say that that's one area where I think Well and Good continues to have a ton of integrity. And, anytime we're being compensated for anything, it's very, very clear.
Yeah. And so speaking actually about compensation, when you guys started Well and Good, you did not take on any outside capital. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So how did you, and I know you mentioned that you took advertisers early on, but were there times in the early years you're like, how am I going to make payroll? How did you keep the balance of keeping, advertisers that were authentic and saying no maybe to money that looked really good but wasn't on brand? Because I think that's a real challenge for an entrepreneur in the beginning. Either they dilute themselves because they need to, or they say yes to things that maybe aren't really, perfect fit, but they also know that they have to make payroll on Friday. So how did you balance not taking on capital when I'm sure you were offered it at some point in the early years?
Yeah, we both really liked just, being super scrappy at the beginning, figuring things out on our own, not having a boss. And when you do taking capital, you sort of do have a boss, and I think we obviously we thought more about it later, but, we had, as I said, like advertising from the beginning, which covered all the costs of the website, and started to help us, start hiring. But we both had, the luxury of having partners who really believed in what we were doing and sort of were able to get us through those first couple of years and had health insurance and stuff. So that was amazing to have that luxury to, essentially not have to pay ourselves for, a few years. And then it was actually a really long time before we took anything close to a market salary. So there was a ton of sweat equity that we were each able to put into the business. And then later, when, people did really start reaching out, and we had a lot of, people who wanted to invest. And I think we saw around that time media companies that were accepting investments and having these huge outsized valuations and stuff. Like it sort of felt like a bubble to us. And we saw a lot of pressure on those companies to expand in ways that might not necessarily feel authentic. And I think as believers in vertical media, and, by that I mean, being a subject area expert and going really deep in the subject you cover, we didn't want to have pressure to, expand into Well and Good for men and Well and Good for kids. And while, that could have been interesting, it's like we really just wanted to continue to serve the reader who we felt we knew so well. So we ended up getting through that, and then attracting in 2014 a lot of major advertisers. That was sort of a pivotal year for us. And some advertisers in particular who were like really, really supportive in terms of payment terms and things like that, so that we could hire up. And then I think, Sarah, we just managed cash super conservatively. So we just really made sure we never got ahead of our skis in terms of spending. So, we never, had those, sleepless nights about making payroll, because we sort of remained, a bit understaffed, so that we wouldn't have that headache.
Yeah, I feel like such a challenge in running a business is scaling and like keeping up with the demand, but also trying to run lean and figuring out that perfect balance. I think it's for me one of the hardest. That was one of the biggest challenges of running a company is figuring out when to overhire, because there's going to be a big boom, but how to also be somewhat conservative. So 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, Well and Good was acquired by the consumer internet company Leaf Group, which was, big news in our world. So was an acquisition always the goal from when you started out?
No, I mean, as I, like, Melissa and I were just journalists who loved the topic, and, we were just doing what we loved every day. So, we didn't have a business plan. We didn't have, like, goals around, we didn't sort of think about it like that. I think, as media evolved, over the last couple years, we started to see things sort of, as I was saying, with Google and Facebook and stuff, the landscape was changing for small publishers. And so there were just so many things that, like, in terms of overhead, that you have to pay for as a small publisher, like ComScore and different ad tech products. And as we sort of grew, we saw that we had more back office needs in HR and finance, et cetera. And so, we started to think that it would make sense to join with a larger company where, we could bring what we knew, which was, our subject and audience and a great sales team. And so we weren't really looking, like, we never ran a sale process. But, it was something that we were always open to if we encountered the right partner. And so with Leaf, it was really cool because we were just doing, an audience development partnership with them, and sort of got to know the company over a period of a year. And then the conversation eventually deepened into, a sale, making sense, but it wasn't something that we were sort of, focused on.
So, question for you, because I think this is really relevant for our listeners who are in various stages of building their business. What was it like the day that the acquisition was final, and how did it feel? It's obviously your third baby, and were there aspects of the acquisition, or the aftermath of the acquisition that surprised you?
Um, I mean, it was definitely like an exciting time for sure. And, um, it was great to see something that, we had built for 9 years, be acquired by a public company. And there were so many, the leadership team there is terrific. And, you know, they have livestrong.com, which was very complimentary to Well and Good. And so this, thesis that together we would have so much more scale and be reaching, 30 million fitness and wellness focused consumers every month. Like, it was very exciting. And so, while it's definitely like bittersweet to no longer sort of own your company and, call all the shots and stuff, it was definitely, there was definitely the trade-off of then, being part of this larger community and the security that comes with that, and sort of their deep expertise in engineering and technology. So, we had thought about all of that before, and what that trade-off was going to look like, of giving up control, but, sort of getting all of this, know-how and security. And it was really worth it to us. And I think because we had taken the time to get to know the company so well, there weren't that many surprises. It wasn't,
Yeah.
and like, the entire team was retained. So we were really excited, that not a single job was lost during the acquisition and stuff. So they really valued the entire team at Well and Good, which was really meaningful to us.
Yeah, that's great. I think keeping your people is so important. We've had a lot of clients over the years that have gotten acquired, and most of the time, I think it's been done correctly, which is not really messing things up, for lack of a better term. Not fixing what isn't broken, because I think so much of why someone wants you is because you're doing things right. And so, the best acquisition, in my opinion, is one where the integrity of the product and the people and the brand is kept in place, but there's obviously added value in resources, or, in the case of the merger with Power Digital and Covet, data and analytics and ways to just make what we do smarter and more effective. But of course, you hear those stories where things don't go so well, and I feel like those are becoming fewer and further between. How has your role changed since the acquisition?
Yeah, so I mean, the first year I was very focused on, the integration, and then I think, to your point, Sarah, I was like, um, and one of the things was like they're an LA based company, and they really wanted to have presence in New York, and so we were eventually became their New York office, and so it wasn't like we had to so we got to keep, sort of our corporate culture and all of that. So that was also, a nice part of it as well. Um, so my role, yeah, the first year was very focused on the integration, and then, last summer we done, a lot of hiring, and I'm really glad that we have great leaders there across the board. And so now I play more of a strategic and long term and less of a day-to-day role in the company, which is nice. So I still love the team, so excited about everything that they're doing and the roadmap ahead. But there's a new generation of leaders, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I think that's also, a good thing every once in a while to get new blood. And I think in the case of me, sometimes like I have amazing, 22, 23-year-old publicists, and they're teaching me things that I feel like a dinosaur. But it's good, I think, especially in our industry, to have new talent, to have people that have maybe come from different walks of life, because I think that, similar to technology, media is just moving at such a warp speed. And, what's tomorrow's TikTok, and how do you get in front of that? And oftentimes it's the people who are, using these apps for 10 hours at a day that I think can make a lot more impact than me reading about it in Fast Company or something.
Totally. Like Kate Spies, who's now Well and Good's general manager, and she leads our editorial and our audience growth teams. And she just brings so much technical knowledge and experience around, building different platforms. She sort of launched our YouTube, and we're have just grown that massively. And we have so many different franchises on it now, which have really blown up during COVID, like our Trainer of the Month Club and different cooking shows. So anyway, Kate and her team are phenomenal, and it's just sort of like amazing to see what they've done.
What do you think? And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, but as a wellness guru, what do you think as we look into 2021 and beyond? What are some trends that you and your team are really excited on, or think are going to be the next, coconut water, cauliflower crust, chickpea flour, cricket powder? What are some that you guys really feel confident are going to be pretty familiar terms or trends come next year?
Oh my God. I mean, literally the team is working on our 2021 trends report right now.
Yeah.
And, so wouldn't want to reveal any spoilers.
And when does that come out? When will
That's
that list be out?
early December.
Okay.
Yeah. And
And
then obviously this will be a really epic one because there's been so much acceleration this year. I mean, obviously, Sarah, it's been, certain, things have fallen away entirely. And then other things around, digital fitness and so on have just, had 5-10 years of growth in a couple of months. So yeah. And so they're
well,
going this year. It'll be a good report.
we that in our industry, it's like the report that is forwarded and flagged, and every client wants to be in it. So we're excited to see them in December. Switching gears just a little bit, one of the things that I think Well and Good was one of the first to do and do really phenomenally was your retreat. So really
Mm.
taking this community that you've gathered online and then moving it offline and allowing your readers to connect with other readers, to connect with your, wellness council and your experts. And can you talk a little bit about what prompted that move and how the retreats have played a role in your growth?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the frustrations of being a digital media company for Melissa and me going back to, 2009 was that didn't have something that you could hold in your hand, right? Digital is just so ephemeral. So we started doing events in the spring of 2010. And we loved bringing the community together. It was amazing. Like it did feel like a community to us. And we loved just like it made what we were doing really real, to get to meet our readers and hear about their concerns and what they were thinking about. And so events have been such an important part of our trajectory. And they were something that, I don't even know if our growth would have been possible without our events program, because long before people were thinking about experiential, we were like just doing a lot of events, as I said, like from 2010 on. And so we would do them for advertisers. And that was sort of, pre every media company having these big experiential arms. So anyway, retreats came about. We were doing like fitness classes and, master classes and workshops and panels. But then as we were looking at travel research or wellness research, we saw that, wellness travel at the time was the fastest growing segment of the overall wellness economy. And then we knew that our own Well and Good community really wanted to go on a wellness retreat, that was sort of, an aspirational goal. And so, to add to that, she wanted to go on a retreat with a, fitness expert, nutrition expert who was known to her. So there was this sort of sea change a little bit that a lot of the traditional like resorts or destination spas like weren't offering wellness that was as sort of up to date as what people were experiencing in the city they lived in, whether it was Dallas or Austin, Texas, or whatever. So we wanted to create these Well and Good retreats where we could like bring this incredible fitness talent, nutrition expertise, beauty expertise, and so on, but pop up within, this amazing place. So the first year we sort of did them at some really intriguing places, but realized it was really challenging to sort of create the retreat from scratch. And then the second year we started partnering with Miraval, and that was just a great marriage because they have all of the infrastructure and, the food program is already super healthy and they're incredible hiking trails. And then we could bring our talent to the program. So we, pre-pandemic, this was going to be, our biggest year yet. We were adding more retreats. We were increasing the size of them. And, for us, we were also trying to make them super affordable as well, even though, definitely wellness travel does remain, aspirational. But so we're running, we're doing them virtual, and, hopefully in the post-vaccine world, we will get back to it.
Yeah, travel is something I know so many of us miss. And, beyond just getting out of our small homes or apartments right now, I think just connecting with culture is something that fuels a lot of us. And culture, environment, your career has certainly involved within the ecosystems of New York, but before that, Turkey, Russia, Greece, Finland, Japan, as you were traveling the world studying the bathing traditions that you mentioned at the beginning of the hour. How has environment and travel impacted, you as a professional and just also your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, travel is so inspiring, and not even just like the places themselves, which, are obviously amazing, but just being on the go, I think is something I miss hugely during this pandemic. Like I feel more productive, when I'm on the subway and going to meeting, like I'm always doing stuff, right? And I sort of love that more than like sitting at a desk all day and doing, Zooms and stuff. Because there's just something really stimulating about being out in the world that, I think gives people ideas and stuff. And, I think for wellness, yeah, I mean, there are so many, amazing traditions and, going to California. Like, it's fun to meet people and share ideas, and see, the different ways that wellness is expressed in different cultures. I think now with everything, we're much more, aware of appropriation, and just being like really respectful of the cultures where that came from. And, certainly a lot of the work that we're doing at Well and Good now is, sort of around that. But yeah, I mean, I can't wait to start traveling again. I was just out in LA. It was the first time I've been on a plane in a long time. And yeah, it felt great.
So where would you go if you could, let's just say the virus wasn't in place, travel was a lot less sketchy, where would you go, let's say tomorrow, if you could pack your bags and go somewhere for a week?
Oh my gosh, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know. That's a great question. It's a
I'd
lot.
go to Morocco.
You
You
go to
gotta go to
Morocco? How
Morocco.
come? Why
Yeah.
Morocco?
It just seems like a foreign world to me. I honeymooned in Africa and it was amazing. We were in East Africa and the people and the food and the culture, and Morocco, obviously being in Africa, getting a lot of that, but then I think it has its own unique culture. So for me, it's always been a dream place. So that's as soon as things open up, that's where I'm headed.
Is this with kids or without kids?
Oh, this would be without kids. Yeah, this would be without kids. So a Well and Good, you've spent the last decade being so much more than a website. You've been a culture shifter, really, and you've made wellness something that was once deemed inaccessible, something that's easy, affordable, convenient. So, what is the dream for the next decade, as we, round out 2020 and go into a new year and a new, a new decade? What do you hope for?
Um, well, I think, now we have really tried to, position wellness as, practices, right? And not products. And I think when people look at the growth of the wellness industry, and it's this $4.5 trillion industry, that has become, I mean, both, there's good and bad there in that, it's this huge sector now, but there's a lot of, questioning about the commercialization of wellness, rightly so. And so I think our standpoint has always been, wellness is about practices, not products. And, if you have a yoga mat and a pair of sneakers and the desire to learn how to cook, wellness can be a very affordable lifestyle. I think people do get, alienated by all of the expensive products. And I think, look, a lot of stuff is like, it's fun, it's window dressing, but you certainly don't need it to, to have wellness in your life. And so, the team now really thinks about well-being is everyone's birthright and wellness is how we get there. And we're very focused on giving people tools to really make it an inclusive, accessible lifestyle. And so, everything from the Trainer of the Month Club video series that I mentioned, where we have like excellent videos, that cost no money that people can do on YouTube, to like all of the nutrition content. And I think, there's so many ways to access information and resources now. So, we just really want to be about, wellness for everyone and making sure that, the industry is seen in that way. And maybe, and I was saying industry, like that the lifestyle is seen in that way, and that the industry is sort of separate, and if someone wants to partake in that stuff, great, fine, whatever, but you certainly don't need to.
Yeah, I think that is, this idea of democratizing, wellness, democratizing, organic, democratizing these things that I think in the past have been barriers to entry based on your socioeconomics is something that I really see shifting, which makes me so happy. There's no reason that, someone who is, not making a lot of money shouldn't have access to organic food. And I think we have a long way to go in making a lot of these things more fair. But I think in the meantime, doing something like making even Well and Good and having free workouts and whatnot is such a big step. And I think it's all these these small steps that add up to big steps. And I agree. I think I love what you said about well-being. Say that again. Well-being being a right and wellness being the roadmap. You said it so eloquently.
Well, because the team has written this. I didn't just think of it on the spot. Well-being, well-being is your birthright, and wellness is how we get there.
I love that.
I will tell them. Yes. No, I think
Yes, that is such an important phrase, and I think that's for food brands, beauty brands, all the brands that you and I work with and talk about. I think that's something paramount that needs to be kept in mind. So a few more questions.
I was just gonna say, I mean, like you've worked with, I mean, I think one of the many amazing things about Covet is you have always had such an incredible roster of clients who are the most innovative, like forward-looking brands in wellness who do all want to bring, healthy, affordable food to people. And I think that's what, personally excites me is like seeing all these CPG companies slowly start to buy up all your clients, and change what our kids are eating. And it's not happening fast enough because I'm sure you see that like the go-to is still a lot of the, Oreos and the legacy super unhealthy brands. But I mean, I think you and I both get to see that it is what the future is through, Expo West and your clients and all of that.
Yeah.
It is shifting. It's just taking a long time. And so I hope that wellness becomes the convenient, affordable lifestyle soon, because it's still inconvenient and more expensive than than conventional.
It should be. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. And I think, we are so lucky. We have the unique point of view of talking to so many emerging brands and people putting their whole livelihoods into trying to make it work, and largely being very mission focused and trying to just impact the dinner table or impact what's in your beauty cabinet in a way that is not just about making profit, but having demonstrable change on this generation. And then of course, generations after us. So I too hope that this boom in wellness and making it more accessible just continues. So to shift gears just a little bit, here at Power, we're really big on sharing knowledge and the belief that a rising tide lifts all boats. So in the spirit of paying it forward, what would be one piece of advice you have for someone who's really passionate about the wellness space, who is looking to launch a business that hopefully becomes a profitable business?
I think some books that I wish I had read earlier are like around Stanford has the D School, the design school, and there's a book called Creative Confidence by David and Tom Kelly, who are brothers at the D School, and it's all about evolving and pivoting if the first product that you put out there doesn't work. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs get like a vision of something they want to put out in the world, but they either hold it too close and try to make it this perfect polished pearl before getting it out there, or they get it out there and they're not willing to listen to market feedback and stuff. And so what I really took away from this book, and they have a lot of other books also around design thinking, is you just have to be super open to what the world is telling you, and evolve your product accordingly. So I've seen some companies just succeed there were actually two companies that launched around the same time that were doing the same thing, and sort of one I saw really shift based on what the market was telling them, and the other thought we're going to stay the path of this initial product conception, and eventually the market will catch on. And I mean, I guess that's sort of a Steve Jobs way of thinking in some ways, but it didn't catch on. And so I think that that's the hard part of staying true to your vision as an entrepreneur, but knowing that your vision might have to shift and evolve based on what you learn from your customers or users.
Oh, that's so good. I always tell my team innovate or die. And that just when you start to get comfortable, starts to get uncomfortable, because you can't, if you want, and that this isn't even if you want to grow your business. I think now it's just maintaining and existing, being able to look at the market and respond quickly, because people are responding really, really quickly, and knowing when it's time to make a shift even when it's scary. I think that's such good advice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
last, this is going to be our last one, and it's a fun bonus question. So last year you added cookbook author to your already long list of achievements, and the book is gorgeous. So congratulations. I know I'm dying to make Venus Williams jalapeno vegan burrito. But what has been your favorite dish from the cookbook to whip up during quarantine days?
Oh my gosh. So I mean, actually that cookbook, it goes back to like what I was saying about always having that frustration that the product was just digital. We really wanted to put something beautiful
Yeah.
out into the world. Let's see, I made the chickpea blondies yesterday. So those are like a go-to for my kids. And there's also a great, it's sort of like a healthy sloppy joe recipe with olives and I'm like totally blanking on what that one is called. And there's a beautiful cauliflower with cumin recipe from Kimberly Schneider. So the recipes are all crowdsourced from wellness experts who we know and respect, and they're recipes that these people make, on a busy Tuesday night. And that was sort of the idea. So, yeah, but
I
I
love
do
it.
cook.
I think quarantine's like brought out the cook in a lot of people. I got an air fryer, and I thought I was like Giada after a few days, and I don't think I've used it since like May. The novelty wore off. But thank you so much, Alexia. It was so fun chatting everything wellness. Tell people where they can find Well and Good.
Sure. So you can go to wellandgood.com. We publish 15 stories a day there. We have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, etc., YouTube, all of those platforms. Just search for Well and Good. And you can also sign up for our email newsletter, and we'll send you the top stories every day.
Amazing. And everyone keep your eyes out for the 2021 trends. It should be released in December. You do not want to miss those. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Stay well. Can't wait to maybe one day whisk away to Morocco with you.
Perfect. All right. Have a great day. Thanks so much for having
Thanks
me
so
on.
much.
Okay.